Ever wish you could make your pricing like super agile? Like, all right, get ready, because today we're going deep on Twin Fields in Salesforce CPQ.
Yeah, Twin Fields.
You sent me a ton of stuff about them.
It's a big topic.
Articles, forum posts, even some of your own notes. It looks like you've been digging into this.
Yeah, well, a lot of people know about Twin Fields, but they don't know how to use them.
Right.
That's the tricky part.
Exactly. So we're going to try to get beyond the surface level today and really go deep on Twin Fields. We'll cover everything from how to use them to how to avoid some of the common mistakes people make with them.
Perfect.
Okay, so for anyone listening who's not familiar with Twin Fields, can you just give us like a really quick overview?
Yeah, sure. So basically, Twin Fields, they create this connection between different objects in Salesforce CPQ, like products and assets and subscriptions. They let you automatically sync data between those objects so you don't have to do it manually.
So it's like instead of having to copy and paste information from a product record to an asset record.
Exactly.
You can just set up a Twin Field and it'll do it for you automatically.
Exactly. It's like magic.
That's awesome.
It saves you a ton of time and it prevents errors.
Right. Because if you're doing everything manually, you're much more likely to make mistakes.
Exactly.
And then you end up with inconsistent data.
Right. And that can cause all sorts of problems down the road.
So one example of how this might be useful is with warranty information.
Right.
Like let's say you have a product with a certain warranty and you want to make sure that that warranty information gets transferred to the asset record when the deal is closed.
Exactly.
You could use a Twin Field to do that.
Yep. And that way the customer service team will have all the information they need when they're dealing with a customer's asset.
Right. So it just makes everything so much smoother and more efficient.
Exactly.
So we've talked about how Twin Fields can save time and prevent errors.
Right.
But they can also be used to solve some really specific problems.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
One that comes to mind is with bundle configuration. So let's say you've got a bundle and you've painstakingly configured all the different attributes.
Like the system voltage.
Exactly. And then when it comes time to renew the quote ACWL, all those values disappear.
Yeah, that's super frustrating.
Talk about a headache.
Well, Twin Fields can actually help prevent that.
Really?
Yeah, they can store that configuration information on the asset or subscription object.
Okay.
And then when it's time to renew, they'll pass that information back to the quote line.
So it's like they remember the configuration for you.
Exactly.
That's amazing. That's a lifesaver.
I know.
So it sounds like Twin Fields are like this amazing solution to a lot of different problems in Salesforce CPQ.
They really are.
But I know from the research that you sent me that there are also some potential pitfalls.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like things that people need to be aware of when they're using Twin Fields.
Definitely.
And one of the things that comes up a lot is the issue of restricted pick lists.
Ah, yes, restricted pick lists.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
So basically, if you have a restricted pick list on a product option and you want to use a Twin Field to sync that value to another object, you need to make sure that the pick list on the target object has all the same values.
Okay, so it's not enough to just have the same field name on both objects.
Right.
You need to make sure the values in the pick list match up exactly.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you could run into errors when you're configuring bundles or saving quotes.
Yeah, it's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
It's just not going to work.
It's not going to work, and it's going to cause you a lot of headaches.
And then another common issue is with synchronization problems.
Oh, yeah. Sync issues.
Like when opportunity products just refuse to sync from a quote.
Yep. I've seen that one a lot.
So what are some of the common reasons why that might happen?
Well, it could be a few things.
Okay.
Sometimes it's as simple as the quote not being marked as primary.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if the quote's not primary, the opportunity products won't sync. Or it could be that the opportunity lookup field on the quote is empty or pointing to the wrong opportunity.
Okay, so we need to make sure that all the connections are set up correctly.
Exactly. It's like a detective story. You have to trace the connections to find the culprit.
Well, I'm glad we have you here to be our detective then.
Happy to help.
Now, one of the things that really stood out to me in the research you sent me is how Twin Fields play a crucial role in data migration.
Data migration, that's a big one.
Yeah, when you're moving everything from a sandbox to production.
Right. It can be a really tricky process.
Especially with CPQ.
Yeah, the CPQ data model is so complex.
There are all these different objects, and they all depend on each other.
It's like a delicate ecosystem.
Exactly. And if you don't migrate the data in the right order, you can really mess things up.
You can break things.
Yeah, but Twin Fields can help prevent that.
They can.
They can make sure that the data is transferred in the correct sequence.
Exactly. They maintain the relationships between the objects.
So it's not just about moving the data.
Right.
It's about moving it in the right way.
Exactly.
So twin fields are not just about automating data entry.
Yeah.
They're also about protecting your data.
They are. They're the guardians of data integrity.
That's a great way to put it. I like that.
I try.
Now, one of the things that I found really interesting in the research is how twin fields can be used in ways that go beyond just mirroring standard fields.
Oh, yeah. You can get really creative with them.
Yeah, like you can use them for custom fields and even more complex scenarios.
Exactly.
So, like, let's say you have a custom field that tracks specific project details.
Okay.
Could you use twin fields to bring that information into the quoting process?
You absolutely could. You could create a twin field on the quote line object to capture that information from your custom object.
So essentially you could build a completely custom data flow.
Exactly.
That's tailored to your specific business needs.
That's the beauty of twin fields. They give you that flexibility.
Wow, this is already giving me so many ideas.
Me too.
But before we get too carried away, I think we should probably take a step back and talk about some of the potential pitfalls in a little more detail.
Yeah, good idea.
Because I think it's important for people to understand how to avoid those mistakes before they start using twin fields.
Absolutely.
So let's start with those restricted pick lists.
Okay, let's do it.
I think that's a good place to start because it's a really common problem.
It is.
And it can be really frustrating if you don't know how to fix it.
For sure, and it's an easy one to overlook.
Exactly.
So let's make sure everyone knows what to look out for.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so let's imagine you have a pick list on a product option, maybe something like color or size.
Okay.
And you want to use a twin field to sync that value over to the quote line.
Right.
But the pick list on the quote line object is restricted, meaning it only allows certain values.
Got it.
If those restricted values don't include all the possible values from the original pick list on the product option,
You're going to have a problem.
exactly.
Yeah.
You're going to run into errors.
So it's kind of like trying to force a large object through a small opening.
Yeah, exactly. It just won't fit.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, so you need to make sure that the restricted pick list on the target object includes all the same values as the original pick list.
Gotcha. And that's just one thing to watch out for with twin fields. What about those sync issues we were talking about earlier?
Ah, yes, synchronization problems. Those can be a real pain.
Especially when you're trying to get your opportunity products to sync to a quote.
Right, and it just doesn't seem to be working.
Exactly. So let's break down some of the common reasons why that might happen.
All right, so first things first, check that primary checkbox on the quote.
Ah, that's a good one.
It sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how often that's the culprit.
You're telling me. I can't tell you how many times I've forgotten to check that little box.
It happens to the best of us.
And what happens if that box isn't checked?
Basically, the system just won't sync the opportunity products.
It's like the system saying, nope, not without that check mark.
Exactly. It needs that signal to know which quote to sync to.
So make sure you check that box, folks. What else should we be looking out for?
All right, next up, we've got the opportunity lookup field on the quote.
Okay, what about it?
This field needs to be populated with a link to the correct opportunity record.
So it's all about making sure things are pointing in the right direction.
Exactly. If that lookup field is empty or pointing to the wrong opportunity, it's like sending a letter with the wrong address on it. It's just not going to get where it needs to go.
Great analogy.
Thanks. And finally, don't forget to check the primary quote field on the opportunity itself.
Okay, so this is on the opportunity record, not the quote record.
Right, on the opportunity. This field should be populated with a link to, you guessed it, the primary quote.
So we have three main things to check.
Yeah.
The primary checkbox on the quote, the opportunity lookup field on the quote, and the primary quote field on the opportunity.
You got it. It's kind of like a three-legged stool.
Oh, I like that.
If any one of those legs is missing or wobbly, the whole thing is going to fall apart.
So we need to make sure all three are in place and solid.
Exactly.
Great advice. So we've talked about some of the things that can go wrong, but there are also some best practices we can follow to avoid those pitfalls altogether.
Absolutely. And one of the most important ones is documentation.
Oh, documentation, yes. The bane of every Salesforce admin's existence.
I know, but trust me, it's worth it.
Okay, I'm listening.
When you're working with twin fields, it's so important to document how everything is set up.
Like where the twin fields are, what objects they're connecting.
Exactly. That way, if you ever need to troubleshoot an issue or make changes to your configuration, you'll have a roadmap to follow.
It's like having a user manual for your twin fields.
Perfect analogy. And it will save you a ton of time and headaches down the road, I promise.
All right, you've convinced me. Documentation it is.
Excellent. Now, another best practice to keep in mind is data visibility and security.
Okay, so this is about making sure that the right people have access to the right data.
Exactly. When you're using Twin Fields, you're creating a pathway for data to flow between different objects.
Right.
And you need to be very careful that you're not inadvertently exposing sensitive information.
Like financial data or customer contact details.
Exactly. So make sure you're using all the security features that Salesforce provides, profiles, permission sets, field level security, you name it.
So it's not just about setting up the Twin Fields themselves. It's about being smart about security.
Precisely. You want to make sure that the data is only accessible to the people who need to see it.
Got it. Security first. So we've covered a lot of the technical aspects of Twin Fields.
We have.
But I think it's time to shift gears and talk about some specific use cases.
Yeah, let's get practical.
Because I think that's where Twin Fields really shine.
Agreed.
And one use case that comes up again and again in the research you sent me is managing subscription renewals.
Oh, yeah, renewals. That's a classic use case for Twin Fields.
I can see why, because renewals can be a real pain to manage.
They can be, especially if you have a lot of complex subscriptions with different terms and conditions.
Exactly. So how can Twin Fields help us with that?
Well, let's say you have a subscription product with a custom field called renewal discount. You could use a Twin Field on the asset object to store that discount information.
So when it's time for the renewal, the discount is already there on the asset record.
Exactly. No need to dig through old quotes or try to remember what the discount was.
That's huge. And then when the renewal quote is generated, that Twin Field on the asset will automatically pass the discount value back to the quote line.
Exactly. It's all automated.
That's like magic.
It is kind of magical.
That makes renewals so much easier and less prone to errors.
So much.
So that's one great example of how Twin Fields can be used to manage a specific business process. What about other use cases?
Well, another one that comes to mind is managing product options within bundles.
Bundles. Yes, those can be a real headache too.
They can be, especially if you have a lot of different options and configurations to keep track of.
And Twin Fields can help us manage that complexity.
They absolutely can.
Okay, tell me more.
So let's say you have a bundle with a system voltage configuration attribute.
Okay.
You can use a Twin Field on the, quote, line object to store the selected voltage.
Got it.
And then when the customer is configuring the bundle, that Twin Field will ensure that they only see options that are compatible with the selected voltage.
So it's like it's guiding the user towards the right choices.
Exactly. And that prevents configuration errors and ensures that the customer ends up with a bundle that actually works for their needs.
That's super helpful.
It is.
I'm starting to see how powerful Twin Fields can be.
They're pretty amazing.
They're not just about transferring data between objects. They can actually be used to drive intelligent configuration.
Right.
And to create a smoother, more efficient quoting process.
Exactly. And that leads to happier customers and sales reps.
Everybody wins.
Everybody wins. It is. They really help make everything run more smoothly.
It's like having a well-oiled machine. Okay, so automation is key. What else should our listeners keep in mind?
Well, they need to remember those pitfalls we talked about.
Right, like the restricted pick lists and the synchronization issues.
Yep, those can really trip people up.
So double check your pick lists, make sure your connections are solid, and document everything.
Oh, yeah. Documentation is key.
It's so important to have a clear map of your Twin Field mappings.
It'll save you so much time and frustration in the long run.
Absolutely. And of course, always keep data visibility and security in mind.
Right. Twin Fields are powerful, but you need to use them responsibly.
Couldn't agree more. Security should always be a top priority.
For sure.
Okay, so we've talked about how Twin Fields can streamline CPQ processes.
Right.
But I'm curious about their potential beyond CPQ.
Ah, you're thinking about the bigger picture.
Yeah, like what if we could use Twin Fields to connect CPQ data to other systems?
Like ERP or CRM or inventory management.
Exactly. It's a pretty exciting idea.
It is. It's like creating this interconnected ecosystem where data flows seamlessly between different parts of the business.
We could have real-time inventory updates, automated provisioning of resources. The possibilities are endless.
It's like a whole new world of possibilities.
It really is.
And I think we're just scratching the surface of what's possible with Twin Fields.
I think so, too. It's definitely an area that's ripe for innovation.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of Twin Fields in Salesforce CPQ.
It has been fun.
I feel like I've learned a lot.
You too.
And I hope our listeners have too.
I hope so.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the basics of how twin fields work to some of the more advanced use cases.
We've talked about the benefits, the pitfalls, and the best practices.
We've even touched on the potential of twin fields beyond CPQ.
It's been a wild ride.
It has. But I think it's safe to say that twin fields are a powerful tool that can really transform the way you use Salesforce CPQ.
They can make your life a lot easier.
And they can help you create a more efficient, more connected, and more intelligent business.
All true.
So to our listeners out there, we encourage you to embrace the power of twin fields.
Experiment with them, explore different use cases, and see what they can do for you.
And never stop learning. There's always more to discover.
Definitely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep those connections strong and your data flowing smoothly.